This is Julie Mullins with Stereophile, and we're here at AXPONA 2025, day one, Friday. And I'm here with Andrew Jones, speaker designer extraordinaire.
It's only day one? Oh.
I know, don't remind me. No, I'm just kidding. No, it's so much fun. It's a marathon, but it's, gotta pace everything. So, and we're here with MoFi Electronics, and we've got a brand new flagship speaker introduction that Andrew's designed, and we're gonna talk about a few design features and also an upgrade. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And not totally unrelated. It's a new crossover and some other new technologies. So let's start with this one. This is the SourcePoint V10 Master Edition.
Yes.
Edition, yes. Okay.
So
and it's a three-way design, passive radiators on the back.
Passive radiators on the back. So it's a development from, we started with SourcePoint 10. Mm-hmm. And then people thought, well, that's a bit big. Can we do something smaller? So we went to SourcePoint 8.
Yeah.
Well, what's the next natural progression? It's SourcePoint 8 as a tower. So that became SourcePoint 888.
888.
So go back to three-way, take that same concentric driver, put it in its own enclosure, add two base drivers, and each in its own enclosure with its own vent out the back. So that's become very popular, and it has lots of base output capability because the drivers I developed for that are short coil, long gap, so underhung motor structure, which is much more linear than long coil, short gap.
Oh, okay.
But more expensive to design, and the way I've done it with opposing magnets to energize the gap is very difficult to do. You have to have the magnets magnetized before construction.
Before installation.
And that's very difficult to do.
Okay.
But we managed to do it, SourcePoint 8. But as I was developing that, a lot of the work is common between what I would need for the 8-inch driver and what I would need for a 10-inch. So I thought, why don't I develop both drivers at the same time?
Yeah.
Why don't I drop the 8-inch cabinet and a 10-inch version and then see what we want to do? And clearly, when we first saw them next to each other, I'm thinking, I think the market's going to want that one. So that's what I concentrated on getting to market. So it's been selling for a while now. We introduced it last year.
Yeah, and you're saying that in terms of maybe the size or the scale?
The size,
or
the scale, yeah.
Price
I mean, it's got great
for
base output capability, great base extension, and it's a okay size if you want a floor standing speaker.
Right, if you're looking at towers already in that category as opposed to a...
But I keep walking into the lab, seeing these 10-inch drivers and seeing this lonely cabinet that just needs drivers in it. So I'm going to put one together and see just what it can do.
Yeah, the possibilities.
The possibilities. Yeah. And then based on that, we can decide, should this be a product?
Okay. Yeah.
And so that's why I've been occupying my time last year, and finally got to the stage of, this is going to be a product.
Yeah, and talking about the process a little bit too, I'm sure you're using some modeling, and obviously you have decades of know-how and experience across many brands, but what did you bring to the table? Did you draw on any past experience specifically that comes to mind you could think of?
Well, given that it's two 10-inch base drivers.
I mean, besides the predecessors, but I'm saying before that.
No, but my thought went immediately to what I'd done with the TAD Reference 1.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But that's $160,000. It was nearly 90 when I left.
Okay.
But there's been huge improvement since then. But two 10-inch base drivers with short coil, long gap, that's what I did with the TAD Reference 1. Concentric driver. Now it's not beryllium, but it's a very good sounding, capable concentric driver. So I thought it's kind of like an homage to the capabilities of a TAD Reference 1, but not nearly the price point. And I'm not saying it's as good, but it's a remarkable performance target to achieve and to see how close this can get. So that was sort of my inspiration.
Okay, so there's design principles applied in a special fashion. And what's the driver, the material for the
So it's paper cone.
Paper cone,
silk dome tweeter,
silk dome,
1.25 inch, corrugated surround, which improves the diffraction response of the tweeter as you move off axis. Keep that for the bass drivers because this kind of corrugated surround is much more linear than a half roll, and I need linearity for the bass unit, especially with engineering such a linear motor structure. I don't want to mess it up with what I do with the compliances for the surround.
And there's operating in tandem and the passive radiators
Yes, so
on the back.
each is in its own enclosure. Small enclosures for the mid-range, equal size enclosures for the base. Each driver has its own passive radiator in the kind of isolated enclosures, and passive radiators are at the back.
Yep, absolutely. And a couple of other features that we talked about a bit before was we've got the room adjustment on the back. There's a couple of switches.
I needed to develop a new crossover,
for the crossover,
and it's quite a complex, big crossover. I can show
that can be a show and tell. We can do.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
There you go. That's a crossover.
Yeah,
that's a crossover.
A monster, yeah.
So, huge inductors for the base section. They have to be iron core at these low frequencies. You can't practically do air core. Metal film resistors. So that's the base section. This is mid-range and treble. Metallized polypropylene capacitors, metal film resistors, air core inductors, and quite the beast. And then,
and is the switch, you said it's
so we've got
1
a switch.
dB
So
between?
I decide on the sound balance I want the speaker to have, but I recognise once you put it into rooms, you lose control of the sound in that room.
Yeah.
Some rooms are very bright.
Yeah, it'll behave
Some
differently.
are not. Yeah. Now we think of room matching to be what we're doing in the bass, but there's a whole thing about the mid-range and treble depending on the room furnishings, are they soft furnishings or hard furnishings. So this switch adjusts the lower treble, upper treble range to partially compensate for that. So that is high, which is sort of the sound balance of the original one. Then 1 dB down, 2 dB down.
And is that done with passively, or is that
It's
with resistors?
this is all with resistors.
Or resistors. Okay, inside.
Yes.
Okay, very nice. That's a nice added feature. And maybe for placement, does it, depending on where you place it, or is it?
Yeah, depending on where you place it, how you tow it in, then you can set this to match your room characteristics.
Whatever you prefer. Okay, great. Well, thank you.
So that works very nicely.
Yeah, well, very cool. And then next we'll talk about the crossover upgrade for another speaker we have right over here. We can segue right into that.
SourcePoint 10 has been around about 3 years. First one I did. So in developing the crossover for the SourcePoint V10, better components, better topology, I'd also incorporated a network that flattens out the impedance curve through the midband. Most two-way speakers have this huge bump in impedance in the midband. When you've got amplifiers that have got lower damping factors, solid state are unfazed by it, but a lot of low feedback triode type tube amps have a higher source impedance. They interact with that impedance bump and they lift the mid-range 1 to 2 dB. Now you might like that, but it changes with every amplifier you're going to try with the speaker.
Right.
So amplifier matching becomes much more variable. So I wanted to take that out.
Take that variable.
And so I put a compensation network in to flatten that impedance curve.
Oh, okay.
It reduces peak current demand because it lowers the phase angle of the impedance.
Okay.
And it's altogether a good thing.
Yes.
So that's incorporated in the SourcePoint V10.
That
I thought,
model there, and
what can we do with SourcePoint 10? Can we improve it? Well, right now I don't need to improve the drivers or the cabinet. So I thought, with the work I've done on the crossover, let's see what we can do to match this to that.
To incorporate it in there, those technologies. Yeah. And that's...
So that becomes the new crossover in there.
Okay.
But it's retrofittable.
Yes,
all new
owners
products will come with this. But what about the people who've already bought SourcePoint 10s? You unscrew the back panel, you unscrew the driver, you unclip the wires, pull it out. This then feed the wires back through. We seem to be missing a cable.
A wire, but
it's gone somewhere.
But it's able to be done relatively easily in the field by someone who could maybe assemble IKEA furniture at an advanced level. I think that's what... I can't take credit for that.
Most people can't.
That's your comment, right?
Yes.
Always,
so
but
there's an instructional video of me showing you how to do it and how not to do it
in real life. Yes.
In real life. And so that becomes all the same ideas that are in the SourcePoint V10 are now incorporated into the SourcePoint 10. So this becomes SourcePoint 10 Master Edition.
Okay. Excellent.
And quite a noticeable increase in quality and it makes it a very nice addition to the range.
Yeah, and it sounds like maybe pricing's still under discussion with current conditions, but
Yeah.
it sounds like a very affordable way to make a pretty large improvement.
Yeah, we wanted to make this affordable. I mean, it's a very big improvement in structure and componentry, but we still wanted to make it affordable for the people who've already bought SourcePoint 10.
Makes sense.
You know, just give them a way of improving it, and so that's the idea behind that.
The story, yes. And we were talking about the amplification, all the variability
The matching
that can be,
and- yes.
right, with the impedance matching and so on. I mean, between amps of the same type, not just solid state versus tube, but all the above. But having that done within the circuitry with some extra parts and so on, can you say a little more about that?
Yeah, it's
analog,
relatively
passive,
simple to do.
not DSP.
Not DSP.
Yeah.
And it's basically a resistor, an inductor, and a capacitor in series. And it's just matched to what the shape of that impedance bump is. So
What it
straightforward
sees.
to implement. And so I think in future I'm going to just do that by default.
Matter of course, or
Yeah,
okay. Wonderful.
yes, yeah.
All right. Yeah. Well, thanks so much for your time,
All right, my
Andrew.
pleasure.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah.